Welcome to yet another tutorial from Babe & Falk. Yeah, that's me. And this is actually my first ever sponsored video, and that's because I don't do sponsors that much, because I really want to love the stuff that I use. And in this case, I actually love Rapid API because it's a marketplace with different APIs where you can grab your favorite API and use only one API key, and it's super awesome. So I'm going to show you how that works. And we're going to build a Google map where we can see all the nearest bars from your location that you select on the map. So that's pretty sweet. And we're also going to see the weather on that position. I'm going to use React query, React, of course, TypeScript, style components. So it's going to be a lot of fun. So nothing more to say here. Just let's get started. All right, I'm going to kick off this project by talking about the techniques we're going to use and the libraries and also the starter files that I provided for this project. First of all, I'm going to use APIs from the marketplace Rapid API. And as I told you, this is a sponsored video, my first ever sponsored video. And I did this because I actually really love this site because it has thousands of APIs. And the great thing about it is that you can connect all these APIs with only one API key. And that's what's so great. You don't have to have multiple keys. You can have one key and you can use whatever API you want from this marketplace. And there's also some stuff that's free. And I'm going to use free stuff in this tutorial. So for example, I'm going to use the Yahoo Weather API. And this one is free. We can check the pricing here. You can see that I choose the basic pricing and that's free. I don't even have to provide a credit card, which I like. So you have some restrictions here, of course, on the free plan. So I can do 1,000 hits to the API per month. And that's enough for this one, I think. So you just register on the Rapid API and put in your information. You don't have to put in your credit card if you're not going to use anything that you pay for here. There are some APIs that are free and you still have to put in the credit card. And they tell you this why here. But in this case, we don't have to do that. And it's the same with the other API that we're going to use. And that's the TrueWay Places that we're going to use to get information about the bars and pubs and stuff that we want to show on our Google map. And of course, we're also going to use Google Maps then. And we need an API for Google. Unfortunately, you have to put in your credit card when you register on Google. But they tell you that they won't charge you anything unless you explicitly set your account on another billing plan. So they only make you to put in your credit card number to verify that you are you, so to say. So no worries there. You can use Google Maps for free. So you have to have this account on the Google Cloud Platform. So go to Google Cloud Platform and create an account. And there you can get an API key for the Map API. And I'm using the JavaScript version of the Map API. So it's really important to activate that. And there's a lot of articles and tutorials out there if you don't know how to create your Google Cloud account and get that API key. So we're going to have actually two API keys because this is what's so great about Rapid API. Yet again, we only have to have one API key to use both of these APIs. So that's sweet. All right, I have bootstrapped an application with Create React App as usual. I usually do that. So I'm going to show you the starter files that I provided for this project. And I provided these starter files because I don't want to start from scratch because it's going to be a long video anyways. And honestly, I have a lot of videos for setting different stuff up. And if you don't know how to install a dependency, for example, I think it's better to start off with a simpler tutorial. But anyways, if we look at the package.json file, you can see that I installed the React Google Maps API. I also installed down here the types for the style components. I'm going to use some styling, and I always use style components. I have React query for fetching the data, and here's the style component themselves. And I also have the types installed for the Google Maps. So these are the dependencies that I've installed. If you go to the starter files, to the folder that says start here, you can run npm install, and that will install everything for you here. Then I have a file that's called settings. These are the settings for the Google Maps, and I'm going to talk about them more when we create the Google Map. We have the map styles, and these are styles because I want to restyle my Google Map and don't have that default look. And I grab these styles from Snazzy Maps. They have this finished code here with all the stuff that restyle it to something else than the default styling. So that's what I grabbed here. I grabbed the style that I liked. And I just pasted that one in here to this array so that I can use these map styles. You can see that I export it down here so that I can import it in my application. And we're going to do that later. In the index.tsx file, I initialize and create the query client for React Query. I also have a lot of videos on this, so I'm not going to do this in this tutorial. I also set up some global styles with style components, which I also have a lot of videos on how to do. So what I do here is that I create a query client from React Query. So I import the query client and the query client provider, create an instance of the query client and put it in the query client const. And then I wrap my complete application with the query client by using the query client provider from React Query. And this component here is the global styles from that I created. And I just set the margin to 0 and provide it to my application. So that's what I do in the index.tsx file. In the app.tsx, you can see that I just created some styles in a component that I call wrapper. I don't actually have any styles in it, but I like to have a wrapper around everything that I do in my components if I want to style something. I also have a loading view, and that's going to be the loading indicator that we use in this application. So I import it here, the wrapper and the loading view, and you can see that I start with the wrapper, and then I'm going to put all my code inside of here. Then I have an image for us. And that's the beer image. We can't see it here, but it's a little glass of beer that we're going to use for the positions on the map. So that's everything in the starter files. No, just wait, hang on. We have this also, the .env file. And this is important because it's inside of here. You're going to place your keys. So we have the React app Google key. This is the key from the Google Cloud account. And we have the React app API key. And this is the key from Rapid API. So paste in your keys here in the .env file. Otherwise, it won't work. We're going to use it later in this tutorial. And as this is a create React app bootstrapped application, we need to specify it as it is with React app before our environmental variables. Otherwise, it won't work. It won't find the variables. So I think that's everything in the starter files. And you know about everything that we're going to use in this tutorial now. So it's time to move on. And in the next part, we're going to implement and display our Google map. We're going to build our Google map. And the first thing you have to do is to paste in your API keys in the .env file. Otherwise, it won't work. Very important, create your keys and paste them in here. And also run npm install in the starter files folder. You can rename it, of course, if you want to do that. And then start your application by typing in npm start. And you should have something like this that says start here. And we can also open up our console. For now, it's just saying that I'm not using the loading view, so we have no errors, and that's great. And then we go inside our code, and we're going to be in the app.tsx file and do the stuff for this part. So the first thing we're going to do is to import some stuff that we need. So I'm going to import, and I have curly brackets, I'm going to import Google Map, capital G, capital M. I'm going to import the marker, and we're not going to use this now, but I'll do it for later. And I'm also going to import something that's called info window and use JS API loader. These are the stuff that we need from at react-google-maps/API. Oh, did I name this incorrectly? Yeah, it should be a lowercase s. Use JS API loader, right? So that's everything we need for now. We're going to import more stuff later. And we go down inside of our component. And just here at the top, we're going to start initializing our Google map. So const, and then the structure out is loaded. It's going to provide us with this little flag for us to use. And then I call the use JS API loader. That's the one that we just imported. It wants an object with a property that's called ID. So we can give it an ID. Google Map script. I think that's the default one that they show you. So it doesn't matter. We're not using that ID here, but it's good to have an ID on your map. The important stuff here is the Google Maps API key. And we're going to give this the value of our API key from Google Cloud Platform. And we have that API key in our .env file from process.env. React capital letters underscore app underscore Google underscore key. And in this case, you can see because we're in TypeScript now, so it's going to complain and say that this can be undefined, but we know that it's there. So I'm going to use exclamation mark, and you do that in TypeScript to tell TypeScript that, hey, I know that we have this value, so it's safe. You don't have to complain at me. So that's what I'm doing here. It can be in some occasions that it won't find it when you pasted it in and saved your file, your .env file, and then you have to restart your application and restart Visual Studio Code, and it should find it. I had that happening to me, and I just restarted everything, and it was fine. All right, then I'm going to mark this with a text, save map in ref. If we want to use, to access the map. And we have to do that for later because we want to access our map. So when we initialize this map, we're going to put it in a ref. So const map ref equal from react.useRef. You can, of course, also import useRef if you want up here, but I'm not doing that. I started to do it this way instead, and I think it's pretty neat. And this is generic, so we can give it a type because we're in TypeScript. We're doing everything in TypeScript. And I've installed the types for the Google Maps. So from google.maps.map, capital M, this is also a generic. And we give it an element like this. So google.maps.map, and we have this angle brackets, and we give it an element. And it can also be null. So we have a pipe, and I specify it at null, and we end this generic. Then we give it a value of null. Do some auto formatting, and it should work. So these types are from the Google Maps types that I installed. We're going to create more stuff, but there are a few more things that we need to do for the map to initialize. We're going to have a function that's called onload, and I'm going to show you that in a second. But we create a function. It's going to take in a map, and we have the same type here, google.maps.map. It's a generic, so we give it the element. So this is going to take in our map element, not the maps. It should be dot map. It's going to return nothing, so we specify it to return void. And as you can see, I call this onload, and that is because this one is going to get triggered when the Google Map loads. So we're going to set our mapref.current to the map. All right. And then we also have a function that is going to be invoked on unmount. So const unmount. This one don't take in any parameters, and we specify it to return void. It returns nothing. And in this one, I'm going to set the mapref.current equal to null. That's because I want to remove the map when this component unmounts. So that's very good to do, so that we do a little bit of cleanup for us. That's everything we need up here. Now we're going to move down to the return statement in our JSX and actually create the map. So somewhere here, we remove this start here, and we have imported Google Map up here, so we can use that component. Google Map, and it wants some props. We have the map container style. You can see this nice auto completion. It tells us what we can type in here. So it tells us about all the props that this component can take in. And this one is going to equal the container styles. The container style. And now I'm going to move inside of my settings. You can see that I created these settings for us. So the container style is the container that the map is going to be in. And I set the width and height for this one to 100% and 100% viewport height. That is going to make it take up the complete screen, the complete browser window. And then we're going to have something that's called center here that I'm going to import also. And that is the latitude and longitude. It's an object where I want the map to start. And in this case, it's going to start in Kalmar. And that's the city that I currently live in. And then we have something that's called options, and we can set a few options here for us. And I want to disable the default UI with all the buttons and stuff. So I disable the default UI, I set it to true, but then I want the zoom controls. So I activate the zoom controls. And I also set the styles to the map styles. And the map styles is the styles that I talked about before in the mapstyles.ts file. So these are the ones that I grabbed from Snazzy Maps, and we're going to use them now in our app. So we have to import this stuff up here, and I'm going to mark it with map settings. I import container style. I have center and I have options, and I grab it from /settings. Here we go. And then I go down here again, and you can see that it won't complain now on the container style because we're importing them, and we have to provide some other props also. So we have the options. It's going to equal curly brackets options, but it will complain because it don't recognize the type. So I'm going to set these options as google.maps.map options like this, and it won't complain. It should be a capital M like this. So that's the options. The center prop, we have already created our center object that we're importing. We set the zoom to 12. You can set different zoom levels. On load, and here we're going to give it the function that we created here. It's called onload also. And on unmount, it's going to be our function on unmount. Wasn't it called that? Unmount. Okay, yeah, of course. Unmount. You could call it on unmount also if you want to do that. Maybe we should do that on unmount. I think it's more specific. On unmount. The exact same name as the prop. So this is everything we need for now for the Google map. So save this file, go to our application, and we reload it. Shouldn't say orders. That's from my day job. And we have some error. Google is not defined. Okay. So we have to look here what I did wrong. Yeah, it's probably because. Yeah, and it's because we haven't actually considered that this map probably isn't loaded. So I'm going to do that. I forgot about that one. So just above the return statement, I'm going to do an if statement. If not is loaded. Then I'm going to return something else instead of the map. So I'm going to return a div that's going to say map loading like this. And you can, of course, have a loading spinner or whatever you want here. All right, so if this one isn't true, we know that the map isn't loaded, and then we return map loading. Otherwise, we're going to return the map itself. So go back. And it will complain now on my API key. And that's strange because I have provided it. And I think it can be one of those issues that I told you about, that you have to break everything. Also have to probably quit Visual Studio Code. And I'm going to bring it up again like this. And then I go back to my console and I run npm start to see if it helps. I reload the application. And now you can see that it works. So I had to restart everything and it worked. So it has something to do with the environmental variables. So if you run into this, restart everything and it will work. And you can see that we have our map here and it's centered on Kalmar, that I specified the latitude and longitude. So that's pretty sweet. And we have this little nice restyling of the map so it won't look exactly as the default Google Maps. And I just have the zoom controls that I set in my settings. So that's nice. It's working. We have our map. And in the next part, we're going to use one of the APIs from Rapid API. And we're going to find locations with the nearest bars. And we're going to display them on the map. Okay, we have our sweet little map. And we're going to create some functionality to this map. So in this part, we're going to fix so that when the user clicks somewhere on the map, we're going to bring up the nearest bars from that location. So we have actually two parts here. First, you can click on the map to bring up all the different locations. Then we're going to implement when we click on the marker. So we have an on-click handler on the map itself, and we're going to have one on the markers as well. But in this part, we're going to focus on clicking on the map itself and bring up the locations. So move back to the code. And first, we want to import some stuff. We're already importing the marker, as you can see up there, but we're going to import use query from React query. And I'm going to use React query for grabbing the data from the API. And we're going to need to create our fetch function. And we do that in the file that's called api.ts. I like to have it structured in a separate file. So in the src folder, we create a new file that we call api.ts. And I'm going to create a few consts here first. So I have a const, capital letters, place, underscore, radius. It's going to be 2,500, meaning 2,500 meters, like this. Then I have a const type. It's going to equal bar. And this is for the API, and you can grab different types. So yeah, they specified in the API the true way places API. So if you search for it on Rapid API, you can see that it has different types. So I go back here, for example, and I look here, true way places, and we have some about maybe. It specified the types here, place types. So you can search for a lot of stuff here if you don't want to search for bars. So just change this one that we created here, and you will get other positions of other places. All right. Then I export the const. I export the function fetch nearby places equal. It's going to be an async function as we're going to fetch data. So this function is going to take in a latitude. It's going to be a number. We're in TypeScript, so we have to specify this. lng is going to be the longitude. It's also going to be a number. And it's going to return a promise, as this is an async function. Promise is a generic, and it's going to return a marker type array. We haven't created this type yet, so we can do that. And I want to create it in the app.tsx file. So I'm going to export this type, marker type equal an object, a type object. So we have an ID of the string. We have a location. It's going to be a google.maps.lat lng literal. And this is, of course, from the types that I installed for Google Maps. So it's nothing that I've created. We have a name, string, a phone underscore number, string. If we want to display the phone number, I'm not going to do that now, but I added it in if you want to play with this yourself. And also the website. We have the website for the place. So these are the stuff that we get back from the API. So you can use them however you want. I'm going to use the name only, and then we're going to have a weather API to grab the weather. So that's the type, and I export it here so I can import it in my api.ts file up here. I mark it with types, import marker type from ./app. And we have our type, and now it won't complain on that type. So I continue on with my arrow function here. Yeah, it actually will complain. And that is because we're not returning anything now, because it says that it wants us to return this type, and we're not doing that. So it's going to fix itself when we have created this function. So first I have a const response. I'm going to await and fetch. I'm going to add in some variables. So that's why I'm using a template literal. https:// /true way -places. And actually we can do it like this instead, because this is so nice here on Rapid API. If we go to the endpoints, it's going to load the API here. And you can see if we select here that we're in JavaScript and we're on fetch, it's going to give us all this stuff that we need here. So we can actually grab this fetch only because they're using then here. I'm not using that. So this is pretty neat. You have this playground here on Rapid API, and you can also test your endpoint and stuff like that. But we just grab this one here, and you can actually see my API key here. We're not going to use that one here because we have our API key in a .env file instead. So I'm going to blur this one out. So instead of this here, I'm going to paste this one in like this, and I'm going to convert this one to a template literal so that I can use my nice parameters instead. So if we look here on location, instead of this one here, all the way up to the % mark, I'm going to have a $sign, curly brackets, and I'm going to use my lat. And just after the C here, you can see that we have the longitude. So we have to have the %2 and the C, another pair of curly brackets and a $sign, and I'm going to use my L and G value. And then we also have the radius here. The language is going to be English. The radius is 150. We can do this instead and use our little const like this. Place underscore radius. And we also have the type. How do you pronounce that? Cafe? Yeah. Cafe. Yeah. Yeah, anyways, we're going to change this. So another pair of curly brackets and $sign, and we're going to use our type instead. So that's our string for the API. That's our call to the API. The method is still going to be get the headers. I'm going to remove this key here and use it from our .env. So process.env.react underscore app underscore API underscore key. And I place an exclamation mark because I know it's there. And the host is going to be this one that we pasted in. So that's fine. All right. So let's move on. Down below here, we're going to do an if not, response.ok. We're going to throw an error. Throw new error. Oh no. Something messed up. Maybe an exclamation mark on that one too, right? Because React query needs this function to throw, otherwise we won't be able to see if there's any errors. And then in a const that I call data, I'm gonna await the response and convert it to JSON. And this one is also async, so we have to await it. And then I return the data.results. Like this, do some auto formatting, and it should work now. Hopefully we can use this one. So save it and go back to the app.tsx file, and we're going to import it up at the top. So I'm going to mark it with API calls and import fetch nearby places from ./API. There you have it. And now we can use it inside our component. So down below here, going to be somewhere below the map ref, I think. Const with the structure out some stuff. And this is from React Query. And I have a lot of videos on React Query. So if you want to learn more about React Query, you can do that and check out those videos. I'm not going to go into detail here. We get the data. I'm going to rename it to nearby positions. We get the is loading flag and the is error like this. Equal use query that we imported from React Query. So I have a query key. I have the array clicked pos.lat and clicked pos.lng. And then you wonder what's clicked pos? Yeah, we haven't created that one yet. So we're going to create a state for that in a second. So that's the key. Then we have a function. So I have an inline arrow function, and I'm going to call my fetch nearby places. And I'm going to give it the clicked pos.lat and the clicked pos.lng. So this is the function that we created. So React Query is going to invoke this function to fetch the data. Then we have a comma, and we have an object with different options. So I'm going to set enabled dash dash dash. We want this to be a true or false. Clicked pos.lat. So if we don't have a clicked pos latitude, we're not going to start fetching any data. So it has to be something in the state before this fetch is going to take place. And I convert this value because this is not a Boolean. So I convert it with a double dash. And then I'm going to set refetch on window focus to false. I don't want it to refetch every time we focus the window. All right, do some auto formatting. And now it only complains on this clicked pos. So we create a state const clicked pos and set clicked pos like this. And it's going to be a react.useState. And we can, this is a generic also, so we can set the type. It's going to be of the type google.maps.lat.lng, not read only, literal, it should say, lat.lng literal. And it's going to be an object. So for now, I set it as an empty object, but you can see that it complains. So I have to cast this one also as google.maps.lat.lng literal. Now it won't complain. So that's our state. And hopefully we can fetch some data now. So I'm going to go down here and create a click handler. Const on map click equal. We have an event. The event is going to be a google.maps map mouse event, capital M, capital M's and capital E, map mouse event. And it should of course be a colon there. So when we click on the map, this function is going to trigger and we're going to get the event, and the event is going to have some stuff, so we can console log out the event and check it out like this. And on the map, we have an on-click handler. I'm going to send in on or on map click function to that one. So I go back to the application, reload it just in case. And if I click here, you can see that we get an event here in the console. So we have the latitude and longitude, and we have some other stuff here. And these are actually functions, so we have to invoke these ones to get the latitude and longitude. But that's great because we need those values to be able to know where we are. So we can fetch all the bars that's in a radius of 2.5 kilometers. So go back to the code. So we know that it's working. We have the event. So when we have the event, we're going to set our clicked position with an object, lat. We have the e.lat.lng.lat, but it's a function, so we have to invoke it. Then we have the lng e.lat.lng.lng, and we invoke that function. So we set it in this state that we created up here. And this will trigger this fetch here when we have something in this state. So we can actually console log out nearby positions like this. I renamed this to nearby positions to see if it works. So save this, go back to the application, reload it. Now you can see that it says undefined, and that's because we haven't grabbed any data because the user or we haven't clicked anywhere on the map. But if I click here, you can see that we have the data here. So that's sweet. We have 16 places, and it's in Swedish now because I'm in Sweden. So yeah, you'll have to live with that. Probably a lot of strange letters here, but yeah. Anyways, these places exist. I know it because I've been at some of them. So go back to the code. It's working. We have the click position and we grab the data when we click on that position. And now we want to place a marker to show those positions. And we can place markers by wrapping them inside of the Google Maps. So instead of self-closing this here, I'm going to end it here. And inside of this Google Map component, we first want to set a marker on the actual position that we clicked on. So we can check if the click pos lat exists. If this one exists, we want to place a marker. So I have a ternary operator here. And we import the marker from this Google Map library. So it's very easy to use. We have the marker here. So that's the component that I'm going to use, marker. It wants a position. And we have the position in the clicked pos. We have the lat and long in an object. I self-close it. Otherwise, I return null. So you can see if this one works. Go back to the application. And you can see that we have the position here. So these are the default position marker from the Google Maps. So for the other ones, for the bars, I want to have some custom-made markers. And now you can see that it complains because it's too many requests, and that's because this one is, I'm using the free version, I'm not paying for anything, so it will complain sometimes that I do a lot of requests that I shouldn't do. So yeah, you have to live with that if you don't pay for it, I guess. And that's because React Query does a lot of fetching in the background, and we're not able to hit the API that many times, but it doesn't matter because we have the data that we need. So we only need the data when we click it here, and you can also set some stuff to configure React Query to not do all that fetching if you don't want to do that. We can set the stale time and stuff like that to configure React Query. All right, so that's the marker for the actual position, and then we want the markers for the actual bars. And first, we're going to import a little nice icon that I created for us. We can do that here. Image. Import beer icon from .images/beer.svg. And it should work now out of the box with Create React App. Before, we had to specify a type when you wanted to import images like this. It won't complain now, so I haven't done that. So it should work for you also, hopefully. And we know that we have the positions in these nearby positions, not positions. We know that all the positions are there, so we can map through that array with data. So I have curly brackets, nearby positions, .map. You can see that it adds in this question mark, and that is because this data can be undefined. If you hover over it, you can see the types. So that's why this question mark is called optional chaining. So if this one is undefined, it won't throw an error. All right, for each iteration, we have a marker. I'm going to create an inline arrow function. I make an implicit return on this one as we're returning JSX. We have our marker. And it's going to need some props here. First, we're going to need a key as we're mapping through stuff in React, marker.id. We have the ID for the marker as a key. We set the position, and from the marker, we have a property that's called location. We set an on-click handler on this one. On marker click. We haven't created this one, so I'm going to do that also up here. Const on marker click. So we have a marker, and this one is going to have the marker type that we created before. And for now, we're just going to console log out the marker. So there you have it on marker click. And it still complains. On marker click, yeah, that's because I'm not sending anything in. I'm going to send in the marker to this one. Right, that's the on-click handler on the marker. And then I want to restyle the icon. So we have an icon prop, and it takes in an object. So we have to have double curly brackets. One, because we're entering JavaScript land in JSX, and the other one is for the object itself. So we have the URL. I want the beer icon to show up. The origin, I'm going to set the origin to be in the middle position of the image, so to say. So these are all predefined properties that you can set on the icon object. And for this one, I'm going to create the new window.google.maps.point, capital P, 0 and 0 for this one. No, shouldn't be a semicolon, should be a comma. So that's the origin. And then we have the anchor point. It's going to be new window.google, .maps.point, capital P, 15 and 15, like this. And the last one is going to be scaled size, camel casing, new window.google.maps.size, capital S. It's going to be 30 by 30 pixels. And then we have to close this marker component like this. So what I did here is that I set the key because we're looping through all of them. Then we set the position that we get back in each marker in the data. We set the on-click handler and pass in the marker so that we can do something when we click on the marker. Then I changed the icon from the default icon to my beer icon that I created. And I changed the origin and I changed the anchor and the scaled size on that icon so it will be in the center of the mouse pointer when you click. And actually, I just realized now, I don't think we need this. Forget about everything that I did before, but it's good for you to know that you can change the origin and the anchor point. And see what happens. There you have it. So it's working. You can see that it shows me these bars. And when I click on it, you can see that I get some data back. In this case, we only want to change the URL and the scaled size, the size of the icon. So if I change the scaled size to 50 here instead, the icon is going to be bigger, as you can see. So you can kind of control the size of the icon here. So all right, it's working, and we have our nearest bars, and that's great if you want to go grab a cold one in the sun, but we don't know the weather. So that's what we're going to add in the next part. We're going to grab data from a weather API, from Rapid API, with the same API key, and we're going to combine that data. So when we click on a bar here, we're going to display it here. Just a little nice pop-up here on the map that's going to display the weather and the name of the bar for us. All right, moving on here, we're going to do almost exact same thing now, because now we're going to hit another API and grab some weather data on the positions that we have on the map so nicely here. So when we click here, we're going to get some information back. So we have to create that functionality, and we're going to start off in the api.ts file and create another API call here. So just below this function here, we're going to create another function. Export const fetch weather. It's going to be an async function. We have a marker, and we already have the marker type. It's going to return a promise, which is a generic, and it's going to return a weather type. We haven't created this type, so we're going to go back to the app.tsx file and create it here, just below the marker type. No, or above, it doesn't matter. Export type, weather type. And when I created these types, it's of course because I analyzed the API and the data I get back, because these APIs aren't typed. We don't have the types for them, so we have to create them ourselves in this case. So the temp is going to be a number. Whoa. A number. And then we have the text, it's going to be a string. So this is everything that we need from this weather type API. So save this file, go back to the API, and up here, we're going to import the weather type like this. So now it won't complain. And this is not an array, because this is a type for each position. So it's a single object. So we have the arrow function, and I'm going to do as before. I'm going to go inside of Rapid API, and we have the Yahoo Weather API. And if we go to the endpoints here to the playground, it's super sweet. It shows us everything we need, and we can play around with the API. You can test the endpoint here also if you want to do that. So it will bring back some data. Hopefully you can see here the data that you get back. And then I go back to the code snippets, and I'm going to select JavaScript and fetch. And we have the code here. I grab only this part here, and I'm going to blur out the API key again for you. I don't want to show that for you. All right, so I have a const response wait, and then I paste it in. And I'm going to change this to template literal with backticks. And I'm going to do the same thing as before. I'm going to change some stuff here. So we have the lat. You can see just after the equal sign, in this part here, just as before this ampersand, I'm going to have a $sign, double curly brackets, and from the marker.location, I have the lat. And I do the same. I can actually copy this one here, and I paste it in just after the long equal sign here, just before the ampersand. This one is going to be LNG. So that's everything we have to do with that little string. And the headers, we're going to change this one here also and grab the API key from the process.env dot react underscore app underscore API underscore key. And I create an exclamation mark because we know that it's there. Otherwise it will complain. But we know that we have the key, so it's safe to do that. And below here, we do the same stuff. We can actually copy this one here. And you can, of course, combine this in one function if you want to do that. And in this case, we're not going to return the result only because we're going to return an object. So return an object. I'm going to set the temp. Data, and from the data dot current underscore observation dot condition dot temperature, like this. And we have the text from the data dot current observation dot condition dot text. So we only need the temp and the text actually for this one. So that's why I return this object only, or you can return all the data if you want to do that and grab it inside of your app.tsx file instead. But this should be it. Save the file, go back to the app.tsx. We start by importing this new fetch function, fetch weather, so that we can use it. And here somewhere, we're going to create another fetch instance with React query. And I'm going to remove the sidebar. And also, just as before, I create a const. I destructure out some stuff here. We have the data. I rename it to marker weather, comma, is loading. I rename this to is loading marker weather, comma, is error. And the renaming here is needed because otherwise it will conflict with these ones here, as you can see, because we destructure out the same properties with the same name. So that's why I renamed them. Is error marker weather. It's also great to rename them so that you know more specific what these are for. Equal. Use query. We have the key, the query key. Selected marker.id. I provide it in an array. You don't need to provide it in an array if you don't want to. You can provide a string. We have an inline function. And as you can see, it complains now also because we don't have any state for this one, selected marker. So we're going to create that one just as before. Up here, const selected marker, comma, set selected marker equal react dot useState. And this one is going to be of the type marker type, like this. And we have an object, and I'm going to cast it as a marker type. Not markery type, marker type. Right? Something like this. We have our state, so we can continue on with the function down below here. And we're going to call the fetch weather with the selected marker, like this. We have a comma, and we have our little config object here enabled. Double dash selected marker dot ID. So we check if we have a selected marker, and then React query will fetch this data. Otherwise, it won't do anything. We don't need to overfetch data. Refetch on window focus. We're going to set that one to false also. And for this one, I can show you how to set the stale time. 60 times 1000 times 5. That's going to equal, 5 minutes. So it won't refetch the data and hit the API in this time frame because we know that this data will actually be not updated that often, probably. I don't know how often the API get the new weather data, but it won't do anything for 5 minutes if we set the stale time to this time. All right. We already created the on marker click. So we have that here. We console log out the marker. But in this case, we're going to set the selected marker with the marker instead so that we save it in our state. Save it. Let's just be sure that it still works. So I'm going to go back to my application. Too many requests. That's because I clicked too often. And we can't see anything, but hopefully it's saved in the state. And we're going to see that soon. So just below here, we're still going to be inside of the Google Map component. We're going to wrap this one inside. We have something that's called an info window that we're already importing from this Google Map library. So I'm going to create curly brackets, selected marker dot location. We check if we have a selected marker. In this case, I can do a short circuit like this with double ampersands. Otherwise, you do a ternary and you return null if there's nothing. So it doesn't matter in this case. I like to show different approaches to stuff, how you can do it. That's why. So we have the info window component. It's going to need a position just as the marker. And we have the position from the selected marker dot location. So it's named location inside of that data instead. On close click. It's going to be an inline function. And we're going to set the selected marker to an empty object when we close this. This info window is going to have a close button. So then we set the selected marker to an empty object. And it won't render this one because then we don't have the location. So it won't render this component when we close it. All right. So that's all the props for the info window. And then we want to display something inside of this info window. So I'm going to have a div. I'm going to have an h3. And I'm going to have the selected marker dot text or name. Yeah, it's called name. And then I want to show a little loading indicator when we're fetching the weather because we have the marker data and then we're going to fetch the weather data. So I have curly brackets is loading marker weather. That's the one that we got from React query. I have a turner operator. And if we're loading, I'm just going to return a p tag that says loading weather like this, a colon, and otherwise we're going to return some stuff. So I have a fragment and I'm going to return a p tag with the marker weather dot text. And now it complains because this can be undefined. So I'm going to create a question mark. So I do an optional chaining. And then I have another p tag and I'm going to display the marker weather dot temp. And yet again, it's going to complain. So I create this question mark here, do some auto formatting, and hopefully this should work. So I save it, go back to the application. And you can see that it's already showing up here, loading weather. And then we have the weather. So it's working. You can see that this one is actually not on top. So probably I was wrong before. We probably need these little suckers here. So I'm going to uncomment them. Yeah, you can see that it's a little bit higher up now, so we can adjust them if we want, but at least it's better. And when we close it, yeah, so it's working. But it says 68. This is Fahrenheit. I want to change this to Celsius. So I'm going to go back to my application. And inside the API.ts, you can see that this last one says F. If I change this to C, it's going to display in Celsius. And also I want to display this little degree sign here. So I have an ampersand, hashtag, XB0, semicolon, and then I have the C, maybe a capital C. That will hopefully do. And also you can see that when I click here on the map now, this one still is there. So we can change this behavior also. We can set this, when we click on the map, we can set selected marker to an empty object. And I'm going to cast it as a marker type. Save it, go back. And let's see if it works. So I click on this and then I click here and now it disappears. when I select a new position on the map. And now it's also displayed in Celsius. So that's great. So it's working. And you can see that this great stuff with React Query, the data is cached. So it won't have to fetch it again when we already have the data. Here it's loading the weather. But then if I click again, you can see that it's already there instantly. And that is because React Query cached the data. And this data is actually stale now because we set the stale time. So this is displaying in Fahrenheit. So that's also a good example on when you set the stale time. So I have to reload the application for it to wipe out that data to be accurate. So now everything should be in Celsius. So this is actually the basic functionality, and it's pretty cool actually. And in the next part, I'm going to add in some geolocation also. So you're going to be able to click on a button up here in the right corner to get your current position and grab all the nearest bars from that position. I have one more thing that I want to show you, and that is geolocation and how we can show the nearest bars depending on where you are in the world. So that's what we're going to do. So go back to the code. First, we're going to create a new component that is going to be a button on top of the screen that we can click to show that location. So inside the SRC folder, I create a new folder that's called components. And inside of that, I create a new file that I call current location.tsx. And I'm also going to create a file for the styles, current location.styles.ts. So we can start off with the styles. It's going to be very, very simple. I import styled from style components. Then I export the const styled btn. It's going to be styled button equal style.button. Double backticks, and inside of this one, I'm going to have a position of absolute. I'm going to position it to the top right. First, I set the set index to 2. I want it to be positioned over the map. And top is going to be 20 pixels, and right is going to be 20 pixels to give it some nice margin. All right, so that's the styles for the component. So move inside of the current location.tsx file, and we're going to import React from React. Then we have the styles, import style v10 from /current location styles. And we're going to have some props. So we create a type for the props. I'm going to send in a function to this one. It's going to be called move_to, because when we click on that button, we want the map to move the position to where we are. So move_to is going to be a function that takes you in a position. It's going to be a google.maps.lat_lng literal for that position. And it's going to return void. It's going to return nothing. So that's the props. Then we can create the component itself. Const current location. It's a react.fc. It's a functional component, and we give it the props. And this is how you do it in TypeScript. I have a lot of videos on that also. You specify it as a react.fc, and it's a generic, so we send in the props here. And there's other ways to type your components, but this is the easiest way to do it in React. Then with the structure out the prop move_to, that's going to be that function, that callback function. We have an arrow function, curly brackets. I'm going to create a state, disabled, set disabled. It's going to be a react.useState. And I set it to false first. So I want this button to be disabled. Meanwhile, we calculate the current position, so we can't click that button again. So that's why I have this state. And then I return something. We're going to have some JSX. We're going to have our styled btn. And for this one, as it's a styled button, we have the disabled prop that we give the disabled state. And the on-click handler is going to be, for this one, it's an inline arrow function. And I have curly brackets. I'm going to make an explicit return on this one. So first, I want to deactivate button when geolocation is working. All right. So I set the disabled to true. We could also create this function up here. Of course, we don't have to inline it like this. But as I said before, I like to show you different approaches to stuff when I teach. And for this geolocation, we have something built into the new modern browsers. That's navigator and .geolocation.getCurrentPosition. And we provide a function that's going to be called with the position like this. So first I want to activate button when geolocation has finished. So I set disabled to false like this. Then call the callback function. We're going to create this callback function in the app.tsx file in a second. So we have the prop move to, and we provide this one with a position object. Lat is going to be from the position dot towards latitude. LNG is going to be from the position dot towards dot longitude. Like this. And then just below here, we have to close that component also. Auto format it. And just below here, we can also display something inside of this button. So it shouldn't actually be self-closed like this. We should have a closing tag. And inside of here, I'm going to check if disabled. Then we know that we're searching. Searching like this, shouldn't be double P tags. Otherwise, we display a P tag that says get current position like this. So that's our button. And the last thing we have to do is to export default current location. And then we can use this component on our map. So move back to the app.tsx, and the first thing we do is to import this button at the top. So components. I have a habit of making these marks here. When I have a lot of stuff, it's good to have them. It's easy to see what you're importing then. But probably not needed in this case, but it's a habit of mine when I'm working on larger applications. So import current location from ./components current location. All right. So first we have to create this callback function that we called onload. We can do it maybe here. No, it's not called onload. It's called move to and not onload. And we can create it above the onload callback function. So const move to equal. It's going to take in the position. And that one is going to be a google.maps.lat.lng literal. And then we do some stuff inside of here. First, we check if the map ref.current, if we have a map, otherwise we don't do anything. And the map ref.current. And this is also why we placed the map in a ref up here in the beginning of this tutorial, so that we can access the map here and do stuff to it. So mapref.current, we have something that's called pan2. And this one takes in an object with a lat. So we have that from the position.lat, and the LND is going to be the position.lnd. Then we can also set the zoom level. So mapref.current.set zoom. And we set it to 12. And then we set the click position also to the same position. And we have the position here. So what we're going to do here is when we click on that button for geolocation, we're going to check if we have a map. If we have that, we're going to pan to that location that we send in from that component, because this is the callback function that we take in as a prop to this current location, and we call that function here, and we give it an object with the latitude and longitude. So we have that position here. So on the map, we have a function that's called pan2, and it takes in an object with the latitude and the longitude. So that's what we give it. And we also have a function that's called set zoom. We can set the zoom level. And then I set the click position to the same position that the geolocation gave us. All right, so that's the move to callback function. And there's not much left to do now. Actually, we have to place this component, current location, and we have the prop move to, and we give it the move to function like this. Save the file, go back to the application. And you can see that we have this position button here. You could also have this nice little icon here that you used to see if you want to have that. And also I have to say that you have to activate this geolocation stuff on your system. I had to go inside my settings on my Mac and allow it to actually get the positions. Otherwise it won't work. So you will probably get a pop-up here that will tell you that you have to allow this. Otherwise it won't work. I've already done this, so I shouldn't have to do that. So I click here and you can see searching. And now it gets my position and I see the closest bars here. So that's nice. It's working. And it's working everywhere in the world. You don't have to be in Sweden or anything. I can check Copenhagen here in Denmark. I click there and you can see that I get a lot of nice places here to go to grab a cold one. So this is it for this tutorial. I hope you enjoyed it and learned a lot of stuff. Go check out Rapid API and all this Google Maps stuff that I showed you now. And if you like this one, as always, subscribe, click the notification button and spread the word. And see you in another one.